A few days ago, the Instagram account Slapshot pointed out that the Avalanche were first in the league in points percentage, but were 7th in win percentage, implying that their 5 extra time losses were keeping them at the top. The comments were filled with people in agreement that this is a problem and that the point system should change. So let's analyze the issue to see how much of a problem this is. I recently did a video on the huge rise in overtime games this season, but you can also just tell by looking at some of these redonkulous records that overtime games are prevalent, and that teams are moving up in the standings despite losing over half of their games. This is why many people turn to the IIHF point system, which is already used by many other leagues. The difference in this point system is that it rewards regulation wins with 3 points and gives 2 points for extra time wins. The idea here is that it would make the standings more reflective of who the best teams are. If we look back at the salary cap era, excluding the 3 shortened seasons, we can see that over half of the teams would have moved by at least 1 spot in the league standings, 36% of teams would have moved by at least 1 spot in the conference standings, and only a few teams would have changed spots within their division. However, even then, these changes are usually only by 1 spot. Only a handful of teams were noticeably victimized by the NHL's point system. But what's most important here is that only 3.5% of teams would have had their status as a playoff team changed. In other words, out of the 520 teams, 9 playoff teams would have actually missed the playoffs under an IIHF point system. And 9 teams that missed the playoffs under the NHL system would have actually made the playoffs under the other system. The graph is a bit small, so you can pause the video to zoom in. But the most recent situation of this was in 2018, where the Panthers would have made the playoffs instead of the Blue Jackets. The 2006 Oilers are the only team in this scenario that did significantly well in the playoffs. So overall, I think this is a non-issue, as not only is it rare to see teams miss the playoffs that otherwise would have made it under an IIHF system, but these teams are always at the edge and are unlikely to do much in the postseason anyway. However, that doesn't mean there aren't other issues. In my opinion, the larger issue is watching the conservative playstyle in the third period of tight games. Evidently, teams try to guarantee at least 1 point instead of trying to win in regulation. This creates a product of conservative hockey which isn't very exciting to watch. If the NHL went to the IIHF system, I think teams would put in more effort to score in the third period of tight games. So because of this, I do think a different point system would be better, but in general, I don't think it's actually a pressing issue. And I would first want the NHL to address larger issues like the awful trapezoid rule. As always, let me know your thoughts on this situation in the comments. And if this topic interests you, then be sure to check out the full article on the articles page at slapshotbets.com.